This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Pasterson and Michael Remis.
What's up, everyone? Hope you had a great weekend. Certainly you Jet fans did. What a heater this team is on right now. Now at 11-1 after very convincing win on Friday night against the Columbus Blue Jackets and a really impressive team effort yesterday, coming back from a 2-0 first period deficit to dispose of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Great start to the homestand as it continues now through the Central Division for the next 3 days. Tuesday night tomorrow, Utah HC. Thursday night, the Colorado Avalanche, and Super Saturday, the Dallas Stars at 2 p.m. heading into the West Final of the Canadian Football League. And that is now booked the best rivalry in the CFL one more time. Bombers, Riders, Princess Auto Stadium. We are going to be fired up all week long heading into what is going to be an incredible sports day in Winnipeg. As the Jets take on one of the preseason favorite in the Central Division in the Dallas Stars. And then, of course, Bombers, Riders for a trip to the Grey Cup. We're going to be all over it today. Dan Robertson is going to join us. We'll chat a little bit about the great weekend for the Winnipeg Jets and a look ahead to the rest of the road trip. And the Hammer, Jeff Hamilton, coming on. We've got some news from Bomber practice, which we will get to, and a whole lot of Jets talk. And why wouldn't we when the team is 11-1 and atop the NHL standings? Going to be a great one. Great to have you all with us. Welcome to everybody in chat. And, of course, everyone listening on the podcast. Just before we bring in Michael Remis, as things get down to the short strokes in the Canadian Football League. Of course, we'll talk Bombers, Riders today, but a big episode of CFL 110 heading into the weekend. And then, of course, next week, heading out to Vancouver for the Grey Cup, and hopefully the Bombers are going to be coming with us. CFL 110 is brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. Also want to thank the great sponsors of WST, Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, the Winnipeg Jets, fansfirst.ca, Rollies Transfer, Manitoba Battery, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, and Boston Pizza. And, of course, we will get to a why not question of the day for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray. Michael Remis, what's up? How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was awesome. I had a great time watching the CFL playoffs Saturday. Loved that the Ottawa-Toronto game was crazy, but the main event was really BC Saskatchewan. Now we know the Bombers will play the Roughriders. Hey, Friday night, Jets in Columbus. Big win, and another win Sunday afternoon, along with some NFL. So I had a great weekend. And there's, yes, big week here coming up with the Bombers hosting the West Final, the now sold-out West Final, the Princess Auto Stadium Sunday, and the Jets. Big afternoon matinee against the Stars. But first, Utah HC with their first ever appearance in franchise history coming here tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it honestly doesn't matter who's coming. I mean, Jet games right now are must watch. I mean, this team is so much fun to watch right now, the way that they're playing. I mean, they're scoring more than anyone in the league. They've got an absolutely lethal power play, which is way ahead of everybody else, including a 10% gap on the number 2 team in the league. They're getting great goaltending. And yesterday, and we'll talk about this with Dan Remo, yesterday's game, just a perfect example of the depth that the Winnipeg Jets have. You got a huge goal from Vlad Nemetsnikov, which was set up by a brilliant play by Josh Morrissey. Can't say enough about this, the vision that he had to find Vlad and give him ostensibly a tap in to get the team back in. When you go through yesterday's game, you had some of the some of the usual suspects getting on the board, although a little bit of a quieter game for the Adam Lowry line, at least points wise. But getting the defense involved in it. We'll get to Logan Stanley. Huge game for Logan, scoring his first goal of the season, then making a massive, very clean check, drawing an instigator penalty, at which point the Jets scored what ended up being a huge goal. And it was Alex Iafallo, a guy that I can't say enough about. I mean, is he capable of playing higher in the lineup as he's done earlier in his career? Absolutely. But on this team right now, the job that he and Kupari and Morgan Barron are doing shift after shift, and then you include what he's doing on the power play, big goal yesterday. The second unit continues to pop, and then the PK as well. So a lot of time for him. Dylan Samberg getting into it yesterday as well. The highlight reel goal between Scheifele and Lauder-Imagn was, well, listen, we're going to get to it. There was some serious highlight. Like, at times the Jets have a bit of a Harlem Globetrotters feeling, and there certainly was the case when they absolutely pounded the Blue Jackets on Friday night. But listen, I'm just so impressed with the way falling down, obviously angry with the goaltender interference, which we'll get to, that was not called. They end up giving up a power play on the unsuccessful challenge and then just continue to do what they did. And obviously it ended up resulting in a big, big win with a couple of empty netters from Nikolai Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. And of course, Ehlers also becoming the highest scoring Danish player of all time. It was only a matter of time.
It's kind of funny. The Jets won Friday, put up 6 on the Blue Jackets, dominant performance. And you put up, you win 6-2 over Detroit on Wednesday. You have another 6+ goal performance yesterday, 7-4 over the Lightning. A lot of the first comments in the chat today talking about goalie interference and the officiating. We will touch on that, of course. Some great comments today from Connor Hellebuck, but this was an incredible, entertaining hockey game. 2 great teams, back and forth, lead changes. You had some hits, some controversy, highlight reel plays, world-class players. It was awesome. And yeah, the Jets offense does have a bit of a Harlem Globetrotter-esque quality, especially on the power play, where you look at the power play standings, the power play stats, and there's the Winnipeg Jets number 1. They said they wanted to get better. 44.1% on the power play. An absurd number, and you pointed this out to me. That is 10% higher than the team in second, the Colorado Avalanche, who were 34.2. So the Jets train keeps on rolling, down 2-0. No problem for them, able to overcome some BS there and make it a game. You had lead changes, and just when you thought, you had an unfortunate bounce, ends up in the back of the net from Hellebuck to Mestikov, all alone in front of Kucherov, pokes it in. There's Dylan Samberg setting a career high in goals on the season, Huss, and we've only played 12 games. So everyone seems to be clicking. Everyone is contributing. As you mentioned, big game yesterday from the fourth line. Iafallo getting his first goal of the season. Everything seems to be going pretty good for the Jets on the ice here, and it'll continue this week at home, Utah, tomorrow.
Yeah, and I know there's some discourse in chat about the NHL power polls, some of which have the Jets. The ESPN had the Jets at number 1 last week, and others that have the Jets behind Carolina maybe or some other team. As Remis said, the only real power poll is the NHL standings, and 11 wins in 12 games right now. I mentioned Dan. Dan's undefeated calling games this year, Remo. The only time the Jets have lost is on Amazon this year.
Yeah, pretty incredible numbers there. 11-1. I was looking at Dom's tweeting out the playoff probabilities. I think what were the Jets at the beginning of the season, 55% or something. Now they're closer to 80 or so when I checked last week. So you still got to play the rest of the games, but they've put themselves in a real nice position here at 11-1 after 12 games. But it's not getting easier. You look at the opponents coming in this week: Colorado Thursday, Dallas Saturday, and then you're heading out on the road. Man, some real tough teams. So good for the Jets, the way they've performed. And again, you're down. How many times have they been down this year? And it's no problem. They're able to have some pushback. Hustler.
Yeah.
And
well, the funny thing was that in the Leaf game, they gave up the first goal and they showed the stat. The Jets were 6-0 when giving up the first goal. That happened again yesterday. It happened in the Detroit game too. No, they steamrolled Detroit in the first period. And just quickly, I know we're going to spend most of the time on yesterday's game. That game against Columbus on Friday was, and listen, is Columbus one of the top teams in the league? No. Had they been playing well going into that game? Have they been playing hard? Have they been pretty good defensively? They had been. They got absolutely dismantled by Winnipeg. The third period of that game was so lopsided, and it was impressive by the Jets, who were in control of the game. But it reminded me of a boxer who is clearly winning the fight and knows that they could win on the decision, just throwing haymaker after haymaker trying to end the game. And that's pretty much what the Jets did in that third period against Columbus. And listen, to their credit, they came back, got down into an adverse situation, and still managed to push through. So much to like right now about where this team is at. Credit to Scott Arniel. Of course, Davis Payne handling that power play as well. I mean, the entire coaching staff right now. It just seems everyone is bought in. They've got a collective will. And to be honest, I think we heard this a little bit from Nikolai Ehlers yesterday, Reem, that, he mentioned it. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and it's all coming together. I mean, it's a huge year for so many individuals based for their professional future. We've talked about the number of UFAs and RFAs on the club. And for everyone that felt that they had something to prove, they're doing it right out of the gate right now. And sounds like people around the National Hockey League are noticing. But this week, it's all about the Central Division, as you mentioned, with those 3 big games beginning tomorrow: Utah, Colorado, and the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, a lot of this team has stayed together. The core of the group is the same. There's this familiarity there that you just can see on the ice, especially when Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor are playing together. Josh Morrissey as well. I mean, they're all contributing, but I think there's a closeness on the team, and they've taken steps forward the last couple of years, starting with bringing in Rick Bowness, refining the defensive game. That was there, and refining some culture stuff. So, okay, that's step one. And now Rick Bowness is gone. He's made his mark on the team. Scott Arniel said this offseason, hey, special teams, we need to get better in this area. And they brought in new assistant coaches, Davis Payne and Dean Chenoweth. And the power play, which you just mentioned, we said improvement.
44%.
I mean, I don't in our wildest dreams, you wouldn't think that they would have a 10% lead on the second place Colorado Avalanche for power play percentage. I don't expect that to last all season, but if you're going from a bottom third power play to a top third power play, well, I think that's an improvement. I have to do some quick math to find out how many additional goals that'll get you. But that's a pretty big improvement, and maybe that would have been the difference between where they finished in the standings and getting that Central Division banner, which we would like to see them get at some point. So 11-1 at 917 points percentage. I mean, your goal differential plus 29, Hustler, which is what is tops in the NHL. It's incredible.
They're more than +2 a game right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they've played 12 games and they're +29. I mean, listen, this week they blew the doors off some teams, and yesterday against a very good Tampa team, spotted them a couple of goals in controversial fashion, no problem, came back and got it done. Just on the power play for a minute, the Jets are the top team in the NHL, as we mentioned, at 44.1. There are only 4 teams in the NHL at 30%. Vegas is at 32. Ottawa's at 33. Colorado's 34.1. And then 10 spots higher, the Winnipeg Jets. And to put it into perspective, that 10% gap, that's the Toronto Maple Leafs power play this year. The Leafs are 10%. The Oilers are 15.2. The Boston Bruins are 14.8. So power play has been a massive, massive part of it. PK's been lit up a little bit as of late. They had the 2 goals in Detroit. They gave up the one yesterday, attempting to kill the unsuccessful challenge. But overall, the improvement of special teams has been significant, especially with the man advantage. Now, listen, we've got some good stuff from yesterday's game. We have to talk about this challenge, Remo, and I know I've alluded to it a couple times, but like I'm sitting in the arena watching the replay and thinking, like, am I taking crazy pills or something? To me, this is like the most cut and dry example of goaltender interference, with Connor Geekie going in with the stick, not playing the puck and moving the goaltender. And somehow it wasn't. I mean, that was certainly the talk of a lot of people at the intermissions right now. And I know Scott Arniel wasn't too pleased with the call.
I love seeing Scott Arniel get fired up on the bench. You know, when you see him in these press conferences, he seems like a quiet kind of guy. Man, we've seen the Detroit game with the penalty that Sandberg took the interference in. The interference yesterday, the goalie interference that wasn't overturned. He gets fired up. So I think that certainly fired up the guys on the bench after a call. And yeah, I'm looking at the explanation here, Huss. It says video review determined that no goaltender interference infractions occurred as Connor Geekie made a play on a loose puck in the crease prior to Brandon Hagel's goal. The decision was made in accordance with Rule 69.7, which states, in part, that in a rebound situation or where a goalkeeper and attacking players are simultaneously attempting to play a loose puck, whether inside or outside the crease, incidental contact will be permitted, and any goal that is scored as a result thereof will be allowed. And you watch that replay, Huss, I don't think it was incidental contact at all. I mean, the puck was sitting there. It seemed like he didn't really go for the puck, or maybe he went and I don't know. He had his stick.
If that was the case, the puck wasn't there when he was moving Connor Hellebuck into the net.
The puck went away, and he took his stick and jammed it in Hellebuck's pad and shoved him in the back of the net. Then Hagel put it in. I agree. It seemed cut and dry. I don't know, who thought that was, a good goal. I'd like to hear, further explanation, because I think the definition of incidental contact is pretty loose. It looked pretty intentional to me.
Regardless of whether it was intentional, you can't just go in and move a goaltender into the net.
You can. They did yesterday. That's allowed now. Why even try for a puck if you're in the crease? Now just shove the goalie in the net and score.
Let's hear what Arnie had to say about this. Obviously that was right off the bat. So what did you think of the goaltender interference call and the subsequent comeback by the squad for the win?
Safe to say you and probably a lot of people were surprised at the decision there?
Yeah, we were, and we'd call that all day. We would challenge that every time. So they made the decision. We have to live with it. We had to kill the penalty. We didn't, and then we're down 2-0. I just like the way guys, stayed in it, found a way to get ourselves back in the game.
Yeah, and I imagine one place all that confidence comes from is knowing you guys can put up some goals and have been scoring 7 more tonight, 7 different guys. That's kind of an example of just the depth this team has.
Yeah, that was a wild one. It was just, you get a lead and tie it back up. We were down a couple, got to tie it back up. It just was kind of a wild one that we kind of stayed in. We always harp on staying with our structure, keep playing the way we know how to play, and that we'll get rewarded. And it's great to see some of those guys score some goals that hadn't scored in a while.
All right, so there's Scott Arniel kind of focusing on the end and the contributions up and down the lineup of the win. But there was more to come on the goaltender interference. He was asked to elaborate a little bit more on just goalie interference in general and that play, which certainly had him hot on the bench.
I can't really comment on that. I think we all saw what we saw. Just felt that Helly never had a chance to make the next save. Understand the first part, but the next part was he didn't have a chance to make the next save, and that was the beef for us.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the comfort in discussing officiating hot off a win would be, but it seems throughout the game too, like there were maybe some non-calls, and at the end there's a non-call and that Kucherov hit on Kyle Connor there. Maybe I'll just ask, in that particular play, what did you see, and did you think that should have been a call?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it. I went back and looked at it. He got him from behind, but it was Casey was engaged with one of their defensemen, and I think he ended up hitting his head right on his head or shoulder or whatever, and that was the kind of the dangerous part of it. But you know what? Over the course of 82 games, they're going to go your way, where you're getting lots of opportunities, power play. You're going to go other nights where you're not drawing calls, but you got to play. That's the stuff you got to. I know that was at the end of the game, but the stuff earlier, I thought we did a good job of putting it behind us and just moving on and taking care of business.
I thought Marat laid that out pretty well, and again, didn't want to put the coach in a finable position, but I will just say this, and I'm not a ref you suck guy. I was surprised that there wasn't potentially one of those chants going on, because there were some pretty weird calls and non-calls that had a lot of people a little bent out of shape yesterday, Reem.
Yeah, again, Jets win 7-4. They've scored 19 goals here in 3 games, a 3-game win streak. And again, I think people want to see a fair game officiated. You want to see it called according to the rules. And this goaltender interference yesterday, there's some other stuff too, but that's the big one where, it puts a goal on the board that you don't think should have counted. And I haven't seen one person say, yeah, that's goal interference, except the people who are making the call. It's confusing, and you want to see.
It's confusing, and it's not consistent. And again, that's another thing that drives people nuts. And it got compounded by the fact that they gave up a power play goal after the unsuccessful challenge. Here's Scott Arniel. This is number 5, Reem. Here's Scott Arniel in the mood, on the bench and with the team once they found themselves down 2-0 in the first period.
Yeah, we really hadn't got into the game yet. I think that sometimes when you come home, we talked about the Toronto game. We never got into that first period. I just thought it's kind of the circumstances got forced us into that game, being down 2-0 fairly quickly. And I just went back and got to work. I think we spent 4, maybe 5 continuous shifts in their end of the rink before we scored. And that's kind of the mentality. You can't worry about kind of what's in behind you. You got to move forward. And I like the fact that we put that 2-0 behind us and got after them.
It was 2-0. I thought the team was playing well. And they really did push after that, Remo. And to me, what started it all, that pass from Josh Morrissey to Vlad at the side of the net, after Johansson had already made some pretty nice saves on the Jets. They had been generating scoring chances. I mean, such a world-class play by Morrissey. And that got the team really going. And, they really didn't look back after that.
Here's a stat that Jacob Stoller wrote at Sportsnet about, talk about pushback. Since the pushback press conference, the Jets are tied for 6th with the most comeback wins in the NHL. So I don't know if that speech worked, but you heard Ehlers talk about this, and Scott Arniel, there's no panic in their game when they're down. They play the same way, and you've seen them come back against Pittsburgh, against St. Louis. I mean, you could go on and yesterday afternoon. They just keep sticking to their game. And even against Toronto, they fought the end when it seemed like the game was over. They made it really close in the last couple minutes. And yeah, when you have players like Josh Morrissey and, they stick to their game plan, which they, in their identity, which they keep talking about, it seems like they have a pretty clear blueprint on what they need to do to win games. And they're going to do this for 82. But I think there's a really bad taste in their mouth left from the playoffs last year, and they want to get back there and show, hey, we can still play our game, because what they played in the playoffs last year wasn't their game at all. And unfortunately, we're going to be talking about that all season, especially as it gets closer.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, they're not just burying it. They're owning it. And we've heard it from players like Ehlers beforehand. I mean, did fans have a bad taste in their mouth all summer? Yeah. Imagine being on that team. And the fact that they've come back and back where they were to the regular season last year and then some, I think is it bodes very well for, the determination of this team, and the fact that, sometimes losing in the long term can be a positive. if you handle it the right way. And I don't think there's any question this team is absolutely handling things the right way. Hey, Nikolai Ehlers, brilliance continues. He was all over the place and has been throughout this season after maybe the first week when things started off a little slow for that line. But Ehlers became the top Danish scorer of all time yesterday. And Scott Arniel was asked about number 27 yesterday and the milestone.
His career, obviously, he's a goal scorer, and you know, they got off to a slow start, that line, and now they're up and running. Now he's feeling pretty good about himself, and you know, I think the biggest thing for me on that play is that we lost the faceoff, and Perfetti jumped one D, he jumped the other D, and got possession, turned it over, made a great play to Stan. And to me, that's the second effort. That's the kind of buying into, you know, playing without the puck, and you know, that led to that. And for him, I'm sure as a countryman there, you know, I think it was is it Franson, or I mean, that's you know, another great player, and proud moment for him.
Remo, very cool moment, and for Nikolai Ehlers, we'll hear from him in a minute. But you know, to become the highest scoring NHLer ever from Denmark, doing it all in a Winnipeg Jet jersey, and this young man is showing no signs of wearing down at all. In fact, he's been getting better game after game this year and continues to have an impact every time he's on the ice.
Yeah, 474 points in 617 games, and man, he's on pace for a career year right now. 17 points in 12 games. And, you know, this guy is a free agent after this season. We're going to talk about all year what his future is with the organization or with someone else, but he's a big contributor on this team right now. Had the hat trick in Friday's game. Funny, his slap shot goal almost reminded me of his first career goal where he scored on a slapper, but he's off to a great start, and really, you know, that secondary scoring from that line has been huge here, as they've had a streak of, again, 19 goals in 3 games.
Ehlers is one of 5 Winnipeg Jets at a point per game pace or better this season, and one of 10 Winnipeg Jets through 12 games that already have double digits in points. Now, are they going to continue to score at this rate? Probably not. I mean, the water level does rise and fall. I think they'll find, you know, the median. But I think it's quite clear that the ceiling for this team is very, very high, and they've been playing close to it. I'm sure they would say that they can do a lot of things better. But as I say, it's been fun to watch. And listen, we mentioned Ehlers, who is part of some brilliant goals. Want to single out Kyle Connor, Remo, because maybe the most impressive play of the game for Kyle Connor was not anything brilliantly done in the offensive zone, but I guess it was the power play when Josh Morrissey's stick broke, and I think it was Hagel had what was essentially a clear-cut breakaway 3 or 4 lengths from anybody else. Kyle Connor getting on the horse, showing his blazing speed, and tracking him down. So it was a challenged play before it even got to Connor Hellebuck. To me, I think speaks to, you know, the overall determination of this team. And it's not just about lighting the lamp and putting up 6 or 7, but even players like Kyle Connor really showing that they are committed to doing what it takes to win right now.
Yeah, Kyle Connor, a great season offensively so far, 19 points in 12 games. And that was just an unfortunate play with Morrissey. You know, you go to take a slapper on the power play and your stick explodes. But Kyle Connor, that's what earned him hardest working Jet on this in today's edition of Jets Weekly.
Great call by Connor.
By Connor Rapchak. So check that out on our YouTube channel if you missed any of the games over the last week. Connor does a great job concisely recapping all of them and setting you up for this week. But yeah, Kyle Connor got hardest working Jet, and I think plays like that are part of the team's identity. Morrissey, you know, stick breaks, and someone else is there picking him up, and you're hustling your ass back to, you know, try to disrupt a breakaway there. So it looked like a, you know, pretty easy chance for Hagel. You know, the speed Kyle Connor has, and it was on display right there.
You know, just a couple other things from the weekend. We'll hear a little more audio. Dan Robertson's coming up. We're going to get into Bomber Rider talk with Jeff Hamilton. The Gabe Vilardi's goal on Friday against Columbus, that play by Kyle Connor was so filthy.
Oh, my God.
I know. I mean, I think the NHL posted it out on its own, saying something to that extent. Like, the Jets are putting together not just goals, but I mean some highlight reel goals. Kyle Connor's often involved, and he certainly was the catalyst of that beauty on Friday. And then you make a mistake against the Winnipeg Jets, and it can be put in the back of your net real quick. We saw that giveaway yesterday at the blue line by, I think it was McDonough. Next thing you know, it's Scheifele and Velarde in on a 2-on-1, and they don't come much prettier than that in the National Hockey League on a straight-up 2-on-1.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are playing great, and you look at the NHL scoring leaders. There's Kyle Connor, 19, 2 off the lead. Great players there, Kaprizov, Makar, and I think we can put to bed. There's been a lot of talk the last couple of years. Is Kyle Connor underrated? And I think we've put this to bed like for a while now, but he's up there now with the top scorers, and we're going to be projecting Four Nations face-off rosters. What is he going to be on the second line? Maybe the first line for Team USA. Having a fantastic season here, Huss, and certainly really great to see. Again, the success that they're all having after a disappointing end. They came back. I'll never forget Dylan DeMello after that saying, hey, we got to be this much better, that much better. They've certainly taken that to heart and improved, and we'll see how this continues here as the season goes on.
Yeah, listen, I do want to get to Ehlers, and we've got some good stuff from Hellebuck today, which we're gonna play. Let me, though, remind you, Wednesday, new edition of CFL 110, brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. We'll kind of tee that up and really focus in on the West with Jeff Hamilton coming up in a few minutes. CFL 110 is brought to you bi-weekly by our friends at Garage Living Winnipeg. And folks, even though November is here, there's no slowing down for the guys at Garage Living. It seems there's tons of messy garages in and around Winnipeg, and it is a big problem for some people. Pat was mentioning me the other day. He spoke with a couple that are in a 5-year-old home in a new neighborhood, and they've never parked in their garage because it's so full of stuff. Garage Living in Winnipeg can help fix those problems and give you an organized garage with a place for everything. It's your chance to clear the clutter, organize, and beautify your garage with slat wall, polyaspartic floor coating, and made in Canada premium metal cabinetry. You can check out all of their awesome work at the website garageliving.com, and give Pat Kanuga a buzz, 204-999-1234, to book a free in-garage consultation or make an appointment to meet him in their showroom at 981 Main Street. Garage Living Winnipeg, garages made for living. Big cheers to our friends at Rolly's Transfer, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, family owned and operated for over 60 years. Rolly's a great sponsor of ours and partner of ours, and of course, the go-to people for your next move. Pop by their website and check out their new relaunch website. Great stuff there on the history of the company, everything they've got going, all of their services. And up in the top right corner, you can click on Request an Estimate for your next move. Make sure you put in the promo code WST for a special price and savings on moving services and moving supplies for WST listeners. Let them know when and where you're planning on moving and what's going to be moved. They'll turn it around with a quick and very fair quote to give you and all of your belongings the white glove treatment on your next move, as only Rollies can provide. For your next move, make it Rollies, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba. Find out more, request a quote today over at rollies.com. And, I got a great note from Donnie over at Manitoba Battery. It is now time to get ready for winter before winter gets you. No one likes freezing their ass off outside trying to get a car started at minus 30 in the dead of winter. Avoid that at all costs. And let Manitoba Battery help you to avoid these frustrations before it's too late. Here's how they can help. Get your battery tested for free at either Manitoba Battery location. If it needs to be replaced, you'll see at least $10 off the battery you need, making the best battery prices in Manitoba even better. They've also got the booster cables ready to go. 12-foot cables, $19.99. 25-foot cables, $59.99. Or a 2,000-amp jump starter for $129.95. Keep warm, avoid frustration, and get ready for winter before winter gets you. Manitoba Battery, the only battery specialist that makes your life simpler with free home delivery on purchases over $60 and 2 convenient locations to serve you. Go to manitobabattery.com to learn more and pop by and see them on Logan Avenue or on Dovercourt Drive if you need to get that battery tested. All right, there's a little bit more from today and yesterday that we want to get to. Certainly Nikolai Ehlers, what a huge part of this team he is. And again, we will have these conversations as to what's next for Nick. But right now, what's next for Nick is helping his team win hockey games and getting off to the best start of his career. He became the greatest Danish scorer in NHL history, but before that, he talked about the mood on the bench amongst the players after they found themselves down 2-0 in the first.
Very calm, and we've showed that already a few times this season. There was no panic. Obviously, not the way you want to start that game in the first period. We thought that was goaltender interference, and suddenly you're down 1 and you're going on the PK, and that's what happens. But there was no panic in our group, and that shows that we have learned a lot over the past couple of years.
All right, Nikolai Ehlers coming off another big night, and a big one for him personally. As we mentioned, the greatest Danish goal scorer in NHL history. Here's what Nick had to say about that milestone yesterday.
Oh, I would not call myself that. You said that. There's obviously I'm very proud of this. There's Danish guys that I've watched growing up, and Franz was obviously one of them. He was an outstanding player in this league. Lucky enough, I got to play with him at the World Championships in his last year, so it's a very proud moment. Very happy.
Definitely a proud moment for Nick. As certainly coming through Danish hockey with his father's imprint on it as a head coach, now to be the highest scoring Danish scorer of all time. Great milestone for him. And I'll tell you what, as a Winnipegger, I feel pretty lucky that we've been able to see him all these years. And I hope that will continue. I see people talking about this in the chat already, so I'll throw this out. Why not question of the day today for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray? What's Nick Ehlers' next contract? And what would you sign him to? I mean, if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you want to make a push and get this guy done, and he's open to it, and I don't have any information one way or the other on that, but it seems like most Winnipeg Jet fans certainly want to see Nick stay and continue as a Winnipeg Jet. What does that contract look like? Let us know in the chat what you think could get it done, what makes sense, what's fair to the player, and what the team could do. We'll get to some of your feedback coming up in fan feedback for fans first, coming up in a little bit. Remo, crank out. We'll go to number 9 right now, because Ehlers also talked about the amazing first dozen games that this team has put together, an 11-1 start, and the strongest output we've seen. With yesterday, a perfect example of so many different individuals on the Jets contributing as well offensively.
We know that if we play the right way and with our structure, we're going to get our chances. I still think that there's a lot of areas that we need to look at and clean up from the game tonight. But overall, I think we played a good enough game to win. And like you said, we didn't panic. We felt good. We kept on going, we kept on playing, shooting the puck, and it paid off. So that's something that we got to keep going.
All right, so there's Nikolai Ehlers, and that insight, I think, speaks to the determination, the focus to build off of and learn from the shortcomings in the last couple playoffs, but also what they can do really well. Now, listen, Logan Stanley was one of the guys that got into it yesterday. Scored his first goal, laid out a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then Zegmas Girgensons did what you apparently have to do when someone smokes one of your teammates with a very clean hit. You have to go fight them. It gave the Jets a power play. The Jets scored. It was a big, big point in the game. But Ehlers talked about Big Stan laying the big hit and then stepping up for his team.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that hit, I was on the ice. I felt that one too. And, for him to step up and then fight, it gets the whole team going, the bench going. And then we got our power play that goes in and scores a goal. That's pretty exciting for us. And obviously it changes the momentum.
All right, there's Nikolai Ehlers after yesterday's game. And it did sound like there were some kids in the background there. I'm not sure, an afternoon game. Maybe, this team that was always so young is a little older. A lot of guys have kids. They might be running around the dressing room afterwards, Remis, for all we know.
Yeah, the Jets are getting married now this summer and having kids. I thought I was ending in at home. I was like, are those my kids around? But no, it's the Jets locker room. A nice, Sunday afternoon game. Bring the kids out, have some fun, celebrate a win. Exciting stuff there. Us yesterday, 7-4 victory with the Jets over the Lightning.
Yeah, well, the kids were having fun there as well. Now, listen, Logan Stanley was having fun. You could just see how excited he was to score that goal. And then, as I just kind of alluded to, made a very, very impactful play coming off of a big hit. Now, I think the coaching staff, fans would love to see more of that physicality from Logan Stanley more often. But there was a big question. Okay, you're going up against a Tampa team that doesn't shy away from anybody. A tougher opponent than you played in the last few games. How are things going to look? Well, they look good with everyone stepping in, including Stanley, who certainly has his fair share of detractors, but is doing what he has to do right now to stay in the lineup. And Stan spoke afterwards and just talked about laying the body and dropping the gloves and, of course, getting his first one of the year.
Yeah, I just try to have a good gap, and sometimes those ones present themselves and take advantage of it. So that was a good hit.
I imagine in this day and age, when you throw a hit like that, it's almost an expectation that you're probably going to have to answer for it, even though it was clean, right? That's just kind of the modern game.
Right, that's kind of how it's going. And, Girgenson's there. Got a lot of respect for him. He's been in the league for a while. So he's sticking up for his teammates, and I would do the same thing.
So you earn your team a power play out of that, and they go on and score. That's got to be a good feeling. It's an example of chipping in another way, right?
For sure. Power play has been great all year, and again tonight that was a big goal for us, obviously. So nice we can capitalize on those and help get a big win.
All right, good stuff from Big Stan. Great game yesterday. Listen, he was on the power play during the second goal against. Kucherov's going to burn a few guys this year as well, especially on the man advantage. But I thought overall, really, really strong game from pretty much the entire team. But for all the people that are willing to pick at everything number 64 does wrong out there, give the guy some applause when he has a game like he did yesterday. And again, I know the plan was to, kind of rotate guys in. I mean, I'm not sure how much of lip service that was early on in the season from the coaching staff, but I kind of understand that if you're winning every night and everyone's contributing, it's pretty tough to pull a guy out of the lineup right now. Good news today, though, speaking of that lineup, Ville Heinola and Jared Anderson-Dolan were on the ice today for practice, both in non-contact jerseys. So I know a lot of people looking forward to Ville getting in at some point. We'll see how long that will be. Scott Arniel didn't speak today. It was Marty Johnson. So we'll probably have some more clarity later on in the week as to what a timetable might look like for Ville Heinola to take the non-contact jersey off and be ready to go. Let's get to fans first, some fan first feedback, because there is a ton of it on this Ehlers contract. Of course, fan feedback is brought to you by Fans First, your number one spot for both buying and selling Winnipeg Jets tickets on the secondary market with no fees. What you see is what you pay. As a season ticket holder, occasionally I'll have an extra pair of tickets that I'll have to do to get rid of. I'll use Fans First. I know my dad did My mom wasn't able to go to the game. He was a little choked that he had to watch it on TV, but really, really great service and product. If you are in the market or need either buying or selling, make sure to check out Fans First. All right, for fan feedback, Running Man right off the bat is at $7.5 million times 7 years. MC Stormy mentioning the cap is going up every year, so there could be the ability to sign both Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers. It's going to be it's tough to imagine this team without either of those players. But I'll say this, I think at this point, it's part of the reason why this is such an important year for the Winnipeg Jets, knowing you've got both of these guys on their present contracts, and obviously Kyle Connor for one more year, but it is somewhat uncertain about Ehlers. Big Corona saying can't sign both Ehlers and Connor. That would be around $18 million. It certainly would eat up a lot of the cap and give Larry Simmons some serious challenges moving forward. But give Ehlers 7 and Kyle 8. We see S-Max 6 by 9 mil. Like, I don't think it would take 9 mil. I mean, hey, listen, if he goes off for 100 points this year, which he's certainly on pace to do right now, then yeah. But, I mean, in the past, he has more modest numbers, although many people, and I'm sure his agent would be the first one to say, yeah, that's because he hasn't been on the top line, and it took until this year to get him on the top power play, and we see what that's done so far. Bottom line is, Nikolai Ehlers is making his agent happy and putting himself in a better position for that next contract each and every time. Couple other ones in here. Nix makes about 6 now, boosting him to 7.5 is only an extra 1.5 on the cap. Kyle Connor is going to be in excess of 9 for sure on his new deal, especially at the spot that he's there. And listen, there'll be other guys coming off the cap as well. Not impossible, but certainly a topic will be thrown around this year. Again, fan feedback, keep it coming in the chat. Brought to you by our friends at Fans First, by fans, for fans, no fees. All right, we've got this Connor Hellebuyck. Do we want to play this first, or should we bring in Dan and then do Hammer, and we can have some Helly after we finish the Bomber chat?
I was going to say just maybe play the first one, and then we can maybe get to the rest later. Would you want to do that?
Yeah, look, because, I mean, I think everyone was wanting to hear what Connor Hellebuyck had to say about goalie interference. And I know on the media group chat today, there was no doubt that they were hoping to hear from Hellebuyck about what happened yesterday. He was at practice, and this is Helly on goalie interference and what transpired yesterday at Canada Life Center.
Just when I thought we were getting somewhere, they go and make that decision. That was clearly goalie interference. Everyone that I know knows it. I think majority of the people in the hockey world know that was goalie interference. The only guys that didn't think so were the guys in charge of making the call, which is unfortunate. I've tried my best to help over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm getting to a point in my career where I'm a little more family oriented. So if it's not going to get anywhere, I might have to move it on to the next guy and pass it on. I've tried to help. I've tried to make it more black and white. That for me was about as black and white as you can make it. And I know it's sometimes going to be a tough call, but I've brought in clips very, very similar to that exact play, and explained why I think it was goalie interference, and I guess they just don't agree.
Oh my God, that was some vintage Connor Hellebuyck right there. He's still pissed about it the next day, and I don't blame him, Remis, at all.
Yeah, as he said, he's put a lot of effort into trying to make things more clear, because goalie interference over the last couple of years is one of the most confusing rules. There's a lot of inconsistency. There's a lot of room for interpretation, a lot of gray area. And whenever they do the review, often you'll hear someone say, well, this could be anything. I have no idea, because I guess the rules aren't clear. And he wants to say, hey, let's have some criteria here. Let's try to make it so it's not a judgment call. And this is what he's preached for years, saying, hey, if you take your stick and intentionally jab a goalie's pad and you're not going for the puck and you push him in the back of the net and he can't make a save, that is textbook goalie interference. And this wasn't, a battle where the goalie's trying to get to the puck the same time as the player. This was a guy not going for the puck and just jamming the goalie in the net, and he's out of position and gets scored on. So I think he's very disappointed. That's what it sounds like to me, saying, hey, I've tried, and I get it. He's got 2 kids now. He doesn't have time. He's like, I've done what I can do. They don't agree. Someone else take over to convincing them what goalie is. Some other goalie who wants to step up. I'm sure there's some young goalie that doesn't have kids and has time for this. He doesn't have time. He's done.
I don't have the same stroke as a 2-time Vezina Trophy winner as well. Anyways, we've got a little bit more Hellebuck. We'll play that later on. But Dan Robertson's coming up right away. Jeff Hamilton as well, getting ready for Bombers Riders on Saturday. Cannot wait for it. Of course, we're starting it off at Canada Life Center, and then Princess Auto Stadium is the spot for the West Final. Princess Auto tailgate party will get going much earlier than normal. They're going to open the gates at 2 o'clock and be throwing the East Final on as they did last year. So if you're not going to the hockey game and you are going to the Bombers, you can get there early. $5 beers, $3.50 poppin' hot dogs. Should be a zoo there. And, of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers, the Jets, Winnipeg Sports Talk, founded and headquartered right here in Winnipeg, and the home of the sold-out West Final, of course, Princess Auto Stadium. Pop by and see them in store. Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, Brandon as well, for the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. And keep your eyes out for the brand new, the latest Mega Smasher sale event beginning on the 19th of November. I know Princess Auto Stadium is going to be stocked with Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, because Bomber fans are going to be there ready to get loud, ready to party, and the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Canadian Club will be flowing maybe more than ever before. Of course, if you're looking for a great historic Canadian whiskey, there's only one that you need to look for. It's Canadian Club, available at your local Manitoba liquor marts and available throughout Princess Auto Stadium. And speaking of great cocktails with CC and ginger ale, premixed cocktails in cans, also available at the football game and anywhere you buy beer. So keep an eye out for it the next time you pop into your local vendor. Got to thank our friends at Wallace & Wallace for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. They are the fencing and overhead door specialists in town. Have been doing it since 1946. If your property needs the security and protection of a new fence, they've got you covered with vinyl, ornamental, chain link, wood fences, and more. And if you do need a new garage door to perfectly match your home, talk to Wallace & Wallace. They've got the largest selection in town as the Clopay dealer in Manitoba. What you want to do is give them a call, 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will be happy to come out and give you a free estimate. And, of course, you can also check them out online at wallacefences.com, wallacedoors.com, or pop in and see them in person at their showroom on Lawson Crescent, just off of Kenniston. And, hey, big shout-out to the fellas at F Apparel, Winnipeg's #1 spot for menswear. Guys, if you're looking in your closet and realize you need to up your menswear game, get on down to F Apparel as we get towards the holidays. Custom suits beginning at $400, chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and the biggest and best selection of menswear accessories in the city as well. If you are getting married or win a party, make sure you talk to the fellas about a 15% discount when the boys get their suits for the big day at F Apparel. Check them out at 190 Smith Street downtown, or go online for everything they've got going on, and you can book a fitting to pop in for an appointment to get fitted up for a new suit or other F Apparel offerings at F, that's EPHapparel.com. All right, let's welcome in Dan Robertson from TSN for his thoughts on the Jets, and then we'll get to some Bomber talk coming up with Jeff Hamilton. Don't forget, CFL 110 coming up on Wednesday, and then next week we'll be live from Vancouver at the Grey Cup. Fingers crossed the Bombers will be with us. Bomber talk coming up with Jeff Hamilton right now, though. Let's welcome in Dan Robertson, voice of the Jets on TSN. 11-1, Dan. What a start to the season, and what a great weekend. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
Listen, spirits are high around here right now. We've got This week is going to be so much fun. I mean, just looking ahead to these big divisional games in the Central, and then Saturday with the Dallas game going into the Bomber game. It's a good time to be a Winnipeg sports fan right now, and certainly a fun one to be on the weekend. I mean, 2 resounding wins by the Winnipeg Jets, one on the road, and then the game yesterday. So much to dive into after that big win yesterday afternoon against the Lightning.
Yeah, it was. It's fun to watch them play, and it's fun to see them win in different ways, right? It's you get down a couple of goals, and you think, well, no problem, no sweat. They're going to come back. That's just the kind of way things have gone so far this season. And I mean, yesterday was interesting. Kevin Sawyer said it when they were down 2-0. They were still clearly the better team in the first period. They got ripped off with that call that wasn't goalie interference, and that's not homerism. And I know there's gray area there at times, but there was nothing gray about that. And they obviously get scored on the penalty kill and came back and won. It was good to see a lot of different players get involved. Sandberg and Stanley scored, so offense from different sources. And man, they're putting the puck in the net at quite a rate right now. So it's pretty cool to watch.
Well, I mean, what do you have? 19 goals in the last 3 games. There's a lot that's going into the net, and everyone seems to have a piece of it right now. I mean, was it 7 different goal scorers yesterday?
Yeah.
You mentioned, the first period, and I mean, obviously, I was in the building. There wasn't a lot of people that thought that call was going to come back the way that it did. And then, of course, the coaching staff has to challenge that. It doesn't go their way, and boom, a power play goal goes in. It's 2-0. But the resolve of this team, just to continue doing what they're doing. Nikolai Ehlers said it afterwards in speaking with the media that, it shows that we've learned something for these last couple of years. And I mean, just really impressive against a really good team like Tampa to be able to kind of shake that thing off, get right back into it, and eventually get the job done in another 2 points.
And it shows that they really believe in themselves, not to sound corny, but there is a level of confidence that kind of permeates through the lineup. So you're down 2-0, and people say, when is it a good time to panic, or is it time to panic? There never is a good time to panic. These guys just obviously believe in what they're doing. So believe in the process. And I kind of hate that term too, but it is true. You can just see them kind of grind away and do what they do. And I think their depth is a lot for other teams to handle. Kevin and I, we were joking that we kind of beat it to death the last couple of games, but even that fourth line that's not scoring 5-on-5, it doesn't matter. They spent a lot of time in the opposition zone yesterday. So they're a handful in their own way. We know the Lowry line is. I mean, how do you defend Scheifele's line right now? And with Ehlers, driving a second line, it's tough to take. So if you're the other team and you've got to deal with that, it's going to wear you down. So, and I do think it bears repeating, because we all did on the power play last year, which was 18.8%. Now it's in the 40s somewhere, and it's not going to be that way all year. But to be able to count on a power play goal once a game, pretty much, it's a big change too. And I think you need confidence for a good power play. So that's the word that keeps coming back is confident when I'm looking at these Jets right now.
I mean, listen, 11-1 through a dozen games, hard to imagine a better start. I don't think anyone thought that this was coming. But to your point, I can't give enough credit to the coaching staff. I mean, Dan,
yeah,
we talked so much about special teams and how that was an Achilles heel of the organization or the club last year. Rick Bowness came on our program and said they'd probably win the President's Trophy if their power play is sort of middle of the road. And I can't say I disagree with how close it was. For them to put the amount of work right from the get-go in training camp and in practice to the power play, obviously the PK, a big part of it as well, and to see the results help this team to the record that they are, it's been a heck of a start for the players, but I think also for Scott Arniel and his new assistants.
Yeah, for sure. And Davis Payne runs that power play, and credit to him. It's nice to see, not to go back and look at the way it was the last couple of years, but just it's a creative bunch of players, and every team has creative players, but utilizing Ehlers in the way they do in that first power play unit. And I said it a bunch of times during the broadcasts this year. He didn't score a power play goal last year because he wasn't on the first unit. So now he's in the bumper position. He's on both sides. He's using his strengths. And I mean, you've got Morrissey from the point pounding it. And it's funny, it's almost an afterthought that he's over a point a game, where in any other season, that would be the sort of the lead story. But they have so many weapons right now. And it's cool, too, that when the second unit gets out there without a lot of time, they've produced. I mean, Neil Pionk's putting the puck in the net. He's got a couple of power play goals. And it's not just the power play, Huss, but overall the motion that they have. And I said to Kevin, we were flying home the other day, and I said, I don't know much about basketball, but it's almost like, they're weaving and they're attacking and moving the ball around and moving the puck around, and it makes it tough to defend. So you see that at both 5-5 and on the power play. And I think the systems play to the Jets' skills overall. So it's working out really well right now.
Just as far as yesterday's game goes in the turnaround, I mean, when you're down 2-0, when you're down 2-0, that game can go a couple of different ways. And we mentioned how, they continued to play their game and they stayed in it. I think they felt that they were right in it, but it often takes a play to really spark that turnaround. And I got to tell you, that pass by Josh Morrissey to Vlad Nemetsnikov for that wide open net, after Johansson had made some great saves in the first period. I mean, I think he was sort of feeling it, and the Jets, but it just speaks to Josh. It really has turned into a star caliber player. And listen, it's been an amazing start for Neil Pionk. That's another conversation with the bounce back that he's had. There wasn't much to bounce back from. Josh has been brilliant the last couple of years, but a play like that, there's few guys that are able to do that. And to me, he turned that game around with one brilliant play and then a nice finish from Vlad.
Yeah, there's so much to like about Josh's game. I mean, you can I think if you didn't even know anything about hockey, which maybe people say about you and I a lot, I don't know. if you just went to a game and you're watching this guy's footwork and his skating, you'd say, okay, this is a good player. And then if you look at his defensive work, which I think is underrated, the way he's able to break up plays, it comes from up here, right? He's so smart. He can anticipate and knows how to use a stick. And so that's part of the package, that vision that he has to kind of maybe see players that others wouldn't. And I mean, you look at turning points, Nemetsnikov, he had a chance in the slot and his stick was grabbed or his arms were grabbed and there was no penalty. And you're thinking, what's happening? And then back the other way, who was a Glendening, got smoked by Stanley, and then Stanley fights Girgensons. And so that was kind of a turning point too, I thought. But yeah, just to go back to Morrissey, you don't want to become, you don't want to take him for granted, right? Because, I mean, how many poor games does that guy have? I can't remember the last few years. Obviously, everybody makes a mistake here and there, but I don't think he's had 2 weak games back to back. So he's just a mainstay. So important to what they do offensively and defensively.
Well, I mean, listen, he's certainly the leader of the blue line. We're seeing contributions from everyone. I think Colin Miller's had a great start to the season, and we got to give some laudits to Logan Stanley for the game he had yesterday. And that, to me, was the game that the coaching staff wants to see him. His path to being a regular in the National Hockey League is doing what he did yesterday and adding some of that physicality in it. I'm not sure if you caught Scott Arniel talking afterwards, but, it was quite clear that sort of a momentum-changing hit, getting the power play, scoring on it, another way a big guy can contribute. And, listen, he's had up and down games so far, but seems to be pretty comfortable in the lineup. And to me, that was one of his most impactful games of the season.
It was, and it's... If you look at it, the last couple of seasons, didn't play that many games. And I know he has his detractors, and I know he's not perfect, but, and we've talked about this too with Dylan moving on, they need a physical presence on that blue line. I think a key to doing what Stanley did yesterday or repeating it is not running out of position to try and steamroll somebody. But when the hit is there, the big hit is there, then do it. It's something you don't see that much in the game anymore anyway, but I think a big part of his makeup has to be that he's hard to play against. And I'm not sure that's in his nature. Not to say that he can't get down and dirty, but he's, seems to be a pretty laid back guy. So maybe it's tougher for him to get up that way, to get that sort of a focus where he has to be a guy who plays with snarl. But I hope they give him a lot of runway, and I'm sure they will. I know some people are saying get Fleury back in there or whatever. They're 11-1. It's tough to complain about anything, but I think that's part of it, that Stanley needs a lot of games to play, because he started the season with injury, as we know, and that's been an issue for him the last couple of years. And look, when he scored that goal, I don't know if you saw his reaction, but it was almost like he was just so pumped, and I think maybe shook off some frustration with that goal, which was nice to see him score yesterday.
Yeah, it was a big one, and he was I'm sure getting a lot of love in the dressing room from the fellas last night. One other guy I want to point out, you kind of mentioned the fourth line on what they're doing. We don't talk a lot about Alex Iafallo, but man, listen, PK, power play, scoring that big goal yesterday, and part of a line that, to your point, Dan, has spent more than their fair share of time cycling it around in the other team's end. I think he's a perfect example of sort of the selfless nature at times that this team is coming to the office with. And man, I mean, as I said, he's not a guy that we spend a lot of time talking about, and he's not a guy that people are emailing about and sending text in. But when you break it down, I mean, Kapari's had a real nice start. Obviously, you've got a guy like Vlad that can move up and down, but Alex Iafallo, a really versatile player for this team that is making an impact in a number of different ways.
Yeah, he is. I was talking with Morgan Barron in St. Louis about the line, and he said, if you look at Alex, he said he's sort of like Vlad. He didn't say that, but he said how he can move up and down the lineup and play different roles. And he's a quiet guy that's really well liked on the team. What I like, when I found they were at their best yesterday in the last couple of games, it's just they're winning the races for the loose pucks. And, not that they're going to steamroll you. I mean, Morgan can be physical. Kapari uses his legs, which he should. He's so quick. And Iafallo just he's got a nose for the puck to break up plays or to break up breakouts from the other team. And they've found their niche, right? They found their role. I think it was in Detroit. Arneal was asked about when might you try and work maybe a Gustafsson in, or Coghlan, who hasn't played yet, or Fleury. And he said, well, I have a plan. But I mean, I even said it yesterday. If you want to get Gustafsson in, how do you do it? I mean, not that there's going to be a big drop off. Maybe he plays left wing for Barron. And I know that's not a huge story right now, what I'm getting at, but just the point is that everybody's clicking. But I think when you have an identity like that fourth line does, it makes it fun to play. I think it's almost like they push each other to kind of pin the other team in their own end, and they'll get chances and they'll get their goals out of that. But that's not their primary concern. It's to kind of keep the other team jammed in their own zone as long as they can.
Well, I mean, the entire team seems to have an identity right now, and it goes right up to that top line. And listen, Kyle Connor has been at superstar levels for the first dozen games of the season. But for all the incredible goals that he scored this year, and I mean, God, that assist that he set up on Friday night was absolute highlight reel stuff. Maybe the most impactful or important play that I think signifies where he's at right now was the play that he made yesterday on the PK when Josh Morrissey's stick, I think it was a PK, when his stick broke. And I mean, Kyle Connor got on his horse and skated all the way back to prevent what was a clear-cut breakaway. And there seems to be, more so than in the past, I think, a real commitment to every aspect of doing things that can help your team win hockey games. And I mean, Kyle Connor, as I say, perfect timing, knowing he's got 1 year left on his deal, but he's helping his team win games in more ways than just being one of the best goal scorers in the league.
Yeah, and if you go back to that assist on Velarde's goal that kept the point streak going in Columbus, I didn't notice until I saw another highlight yesterday. It was a saucer pass on the backhand. I thought he just slid it out to him, but after those great moves, he just flipped it over the defender's stick enough to get it to Velarde. But to your point, and I think it was Hagel maybe who had that breakaway yesterday. It doesn't matter, but I could sort of see him out of the corner of my eye, and Hagel got the shot away, or whoever it was, but it was sort of interfered with because he put his head down and just flew back and helped break it up. I asked Arneal the other night, because after the Detroit game, he said, we're up 6-2, and here's Kyle flying back on the back check to break up plays. And so he noted that. And then I asked him for the next game in Columbus, I said, is that new for Kyle? He right away said, no. He said he's always been hungry to go and get the puck back. Maybe at times in his own end, his defensive play hasn't been great. People get on that. I don't care. You can always, there's a lot of guys who can play great defense. There's not a lot of guys who can do what he's doing. And I know this might sound silly, but just to watch that line right now, I talked about creativity earlier. They're having fun, right? I mean, you saw them in Columbus where they were, and in Detroit too. There were keep away at times. There's, really artistic plays, for lack of a better term, but still driving to the net. And it's a neat combination of skill sets when you break down those three guys. And Velarde's coming along too. And we talk power play. He doesn't have a power play goal yet, so there's still room to go there. But that's Kyle's driving the bus right now. It's a blast to watch it.
I mean, yeah, just to see that level of defensive effort for a guy that's doing so much offensively. I mean, it's a great statement to make to the rest of the entire team. And it seems like this team does have an identity right now, and it's helping them win a lot of hockey games. Just one quick thing on the Columbus game before we get to kind of this upcoming week. That was as dominant a performance by a Jets club as I can remember in a long, long time. I mean, Dan, that third period, the waves and waves of it felt like they were a boxer trying to finish their opponent. And, obviously they ended up getting a couple more and basically putting it out of reach, much like they did against Detroit in the third period. They seem to know when they're in control of games and look to finish them. And it kind of brings up what's a very intriguing week. And I think starting with yesterday's game, because I think we all realized looking at the schedule moving into November, that they were moving up a bit of a weight class, and there's some pretty heavy hitters coming on the schedule. And I think that's what made the way that they played yesterday, coming back from 2-0 deficit, so impressive, because I think there were some people that said, okay, great, well, let's see what you can do when you play some of the better teams in the league. They passed this one test, and I mean, now we got 3 huge games in the division coming up at home this week, which I know a lot of people, not just here in Winnipeg, but around the league, are going to be paying attention to.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people. I mean, when the schedule came out, you looked at it, you thought, okay, this team didn't make the playoffs last year. There's quite a run of teams, the Chicagos and Minnesotas. You thought, the Jets should win those games. I never thought they'd go 11-1. Obviously, no one has, but it's November is a challenge. I know it's 14 games in 29 days, and they have the 3 here against Utah, Colorado, and Dallas, and then hit the road. It's the Rangers. That's a little bit tough trip. Rangers, Panthers, and Tampa again, and then come back from one against the Panthers, and then go on this ungodly road trip that starts in Pittsburgh, and then there's Nashville and Minnesota, LA, Vegas, Dallas. It's really something. So that's, to me, that's a huge test to see where they're going to be at the end of it, not just because of the quality of teams they're playing, but for the time that they're going to be on the road. And both of those road trips are going to be difficult, but so far so good. And to go back again to that the performance in Columbus had come in kind of overachieving a little bit. I think they were 5-4-1, and defensively they'd been all right. And we know they've had such tragedy to deal with and injuries on top of that. But you're looking at them thinking, okay, maybe there'll be a challenge here, but they were thoroughly outclassed. And to me, that's a sign of a really good hockey team too, is to, maybe rise to those challenges, to go into somebody else's barn and put your best foot forward. And that was really something to watch on Friday in Columbus.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this Utah club. I mean, they obviously made some pretty big moves in the offseason. They're not going to be that same old Coyotes team, and they've had a pretty good start. But I think what people are really interested in is getting another look at the Avalanche and, of course, the Dallas Stars. And the Stars will just be back from Finland. I believe they play one game in Chicago before, or maybe it's at home before coming here. But, Dan, that Thursday game against the Avs is going to be intriguing. They have been so streaky. I mean, they had that terrible start, 0-4. They got it together, won 5 in a row. They've now lost 3 straight games by the score of 5-2. One at home to the Blackhawks, one at home to the Lightning, and then in their last outing in Nashville against the Predators. It's sort of a depleted team, but they still have that star power that Jet fans more than any know can flip a game in one single play.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you've got Makar and McKinnon up your sleeve, and that's always a difference maker. And it's not an excuse. I mean, they've been ripped apart by injuries. Some names you're looking at the roster and thinking, I've never heard of this guy before. So these are the little tests all along the way that you like to see, and you kind of circle them on the calendar. And then on the other side, you go back to last spring when that road trip took the Jets to Dallas and to Colorado and maybe Minnesota in between. I remember they pumped the Avalanche 7-0, and we know what happened by the time they met in the playoffs. But I'm sure that internally it'll be sort of a thing where the Jets are saying, okay, let's show we're the best team in the Central. We believe we are. And a lot of people coming into the season thought and probably still think that Dallas is ultimately the best team in the division. Maybe they are, but it's, you look for motivation early in the season. I guess it's just such a long season. And we know how well the Jets played in the Central last year. I can't remember their record specifically, but I know it was great. So, and then let's not look past Utah. I think Andre Tourigny is one of the really good coaches in the NHL. Maybe that people, he's not as well known as others coaching where he's coached the last few years. And I'm glad that franchise has kept him on. I know they've gone through some tough times, but he's really good. So they've obviously dealt with some injuries on defense as well, but they're exciting. They move quickly, and there's no easy games. The only thing I think, Huss, is I'm used to saying, okay, say yesterday I could say, here's Tampa with the puck, or here the Lightning. All I can say is now Utah. I can't say here's the hockey clubs coming over the line. Like, what the hell? What do I do there? I don't know what that's all about.
That is a great question, and I had not thought of it. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll be looking forward to the broadcast tomorrow to see how you manage that uniquely named team for one season before they get an actual moniker. Just speaking.
So is it going to be the Yeti? Is that what we hear? Sorry to cut you off. Is it supposed to be the Yeti? That's the rumor.
I'm not as big a fan of the Yeti. I was kind of hoping they'd go with like Outlaws. There was a couple other cool ones that I thought were in there. I think that the Yeti might wear off after a couple of years, and then it'd be like, really, that's what they named their team? But I don't know. We'll see. That's for them to worry about, and us to follow along. But listen, they're right in the middle of the Central Division right now, 5-4-3. What's interesting, especially with these two losses in Finland for Dallas coming back, it's still a great start at 7-4. The bottom two teams in the division, off-season champs, the Nashville Predators, who have struggled early on, and the Avalanche that we just mentioned, and it's Winnipeg and Minnesota at the top. Minnesota, very quietly, Dan, 8-1-2 on their season so far. A great start for a team that's still dealing with all of those cap penalties from those massive buyouts a few years ago.
Yeah, there's certainly a surprise to me, but I was watching a Wild game the other day. I can't remember. I watch a lot. I can't remember who it was, but I have a new appreciation for Kaprizov all the time. And yesterday we put up a graphic of top 5 players points per game active, and he's in there. He's ahead of Kucherov, obviously behind McDavid, but it's this guy is, and I feel good for Minnesota. Maybe I'll get shot for this, but I love that market. It's a great hockey state. Obviously, it's like another province for me. So over the years, they haven't had a lot of superstar qualities, right? But this guy's a superstar, so he's fun to watch, and obviously they're getting the job done in other ways. I don't know if they can sustain that record where they are, but and it's going to be fun to watch Nashville, and they made the additions, all quality players, but all on the wrong side of 30. I don't know how much Marchessault has left or whatever, but it's not gone the way that they thought it would, obviously. So it's a strong Central, and there's a long way to go, but it's a fascinating division. And like we said, even Utah, I don't know if they'll take a big step forward this year, but there's a lot of quality there too.
Well, Dan, it's been a hell of a start for the hockey club, and it's been a great start for the Jets on TSN, having Sarah back in the fold. And I will remind folks, you're undefeated in the booth this year. The Jets' only loss happened on an Amazon game. So I know you're busy, and most of the games coming up are on TSN, so hopefully both the team and you can continue this hot streak.
I've only ever been called a bad luck omen before, Huss, so I'll take that one. I appreciate it.
Dan, thanks so much for doing this. Great to chat as always, and keep those pipes warm. A busy week for the Jets and the TSN staff coming up. We're looking forward to the game tomorrow and right through the week in the Central Division. Thanks for doing this.
Sounds good, buddy. Anytime.
Learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Yeah, big cheers to our friends at Little Brown Jug, now available at select Boston pizzas, including BP Polo Park, where we had that awesome watch party last week as the Jets hit the road for the first game of the two-gamer against the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, Boston Pizza will be their place to be tonight for Monday Night Football. The Chiefs looking to stay undefeated and get to 8-0 against Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Pop by your local BP for chances to spin the prize wheel, win NFL jerseys and more. And of course, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday will be a huge day at Boston Pizzas for Winnipeg Jets hockey. Your best place to not only have those ice-cold schooners and world-famous BP wings and gourmet pizzas, but the game on all the big screen with big sound, chances to win the Pick-a-Player contest, and get in that grand prize trip draw to go to Boston to see the Jets and the Boston Bruins, as well as Celtics Bulls. Deluxe hotel, airfare included. Enter at your local Boston Pizza during Winnipeg Jet games. And hey, shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. This is a really cool story from the weekend. The Bauer rep in town, Richie Evans, was letting Ehlers try their new stick offering, the Twitch. He had a few. After practice, Nick wanted 6. Richie had already sent them off to Calgary as next stop. Perlator had picked them up. So Royal Sports came to the rescue. Richie came to Royal, and Nick gets 3 stock sticks right off the rack, and Nick goes on a heater. In one post-game interview, as you heard, he thanked Richie and the local store. That local store, of course, is Royal Sports, your number one hockey superstore for players and for fans as well. Get ready for Super Saturday. All your Jets gear. Warm up with some maybe bomber toques or a hoodie, because you're going to need to be warm at Princess Auto Stadium. Of course, NHL, NFL, they've got it all. There is truly only one Royal Sports. Get in there. 750 Pembina Highway. Royal Sports Winnipeg on Instagram as well for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. All right, well, it's been fun talking about the 11-1 hockey team. Let's now get to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who will be on the back end of the Super Saturday doubleheader. CFL West Final. Bombers and Riders, let's go. Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press joins us. And Hammer, I'm already fired up for this game, and we got to wait another 5 days or so to actually get to Saturday.
I think this is what the what do they call them, Huss? What do they call the people who write the scripts for professional sports? So so guys like you can script. So what do they call the guys that write the scripts? Script writers. Yeah. So anyways, now we've established that they're script writers. I think this is exactly what people envisioned for this West Final. I'm with you, man. This is going to be an exciting game. This is the first time that these two teams have met for a chance with a trip to the Grey Cup on the line since 2021. Of course, the Riders have not been in the playoffs since. They live up to their end of the deal this time around, and you have a prairie rival clash for the 4th time. Is my math there? Yeah, it's correct. 4th time this season, Hassan. It will be the biggest game. And I think it's got that same feel as all the other games, as every game where the Riders and Bombers face off. It feels like anyone could get this done. Obviously, news yesterday that Princess Auto Stadium has been sold out. You can expect another rocking barn. That's going to work for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but whether or not they can get it done, punch their ticket to it's weird how you got to think about the number of times they've been to the Grey Cup, Huss, but this will be a 5th straight time. This is their 6th straight West Final, and I couldn't think of a better opponent for the Blue and Gold than those pesky neighbors over to our west there, Huss.
Hey, it's the best rivalry in the Canadian Football League by a lot. And we're going to get it. A 4th matchup between these two teams this season that split 2-1. Bombers winning both the Labor Day game and the Banjo Bowl after dropping the earlier game in Regina. And I don't think there's much doubt that these are the two best teams in the CFL West. I will say this. I think that the margin between these two teams is very tight. I think things like home crowd, having the bye could benefit the Bombers greatly. And we knew that was at stake when they were playing Montreal the previous week before. I will say this, and we like to touch on betting lines here. I was a little surprised that the Bombers opened as 4.5-point favorites. I was really thinking this would be more around a 3-point game, essentially two relatively even teams, with the Bombers getting the benefit of the doubt of the 3 points for a very impactful home field advantage.
I think if you could probably go ask your buddies down at Coolbet on why those numbers are what they are. I'm not overly surprised. I'm just surprised, Huss, because 4.5 points between these two teams, it seems like it always goes down to the wire. Anywhere between 3 and 5 points. That's probably why they're hovering around that 4.5-point mark, because we've seen these games go so close. And with the CFL, things happen at the end. Obviously, I don't want to get into too much of the odds makers' heads, but there's the 3 points for being at home. They must believe there's a slight edge there, a 1.5 edge in favor of Winnipeg for the season series. The fact that the season series, yes, it was 2-1 Winnipeg, but Winnipeg was the winner in the two most recent outings. Obviously, that first game was much earlier in the season. There's other things too. I mean, there is a big thing to not having to play the semifinal games. That the Riders are going to be, feeling the bumps and bruises from this past weekend as they head into preparation for this week. And meanwhile, the Bombers have been resting for the last, X amount of days week here, while they prepare for their opponent, and have already got a head start on planning for them, right? I mean, they were talking about how they're doing 50-50 watching. And, I have to ask the question, Huss, I am curious a little bit if they did allow themselves to cheat a bit, maybe watch a little more Roughriders than BC Lions, just because of I think the favorite into that one, what was the Riders. But nonetheless, that's I don't see the points too much or too crazy of a separation. It's wild to think of more than a field goal when these two teams face, even when you consider all those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, like as I say, we're going to be talking about this game and the matchups all week, and monitoring what's going on in Saskatchewan with the Riders as they get back to practice. Bombers are already on the practice field right now. We may as well get to this right now. We can go back and talk about the games on the weekend. Jamal Woods, defensive tackle, back practicing. Brandon Alexander practiced as well. Drew Latarski's been ripping around, but not in uniform. Carey Wilson hitting the sled with the rest of the linebackers. And then this is from Derek Taylor. Jake Kelly and Nick Taylor working at safety in with the first team defense right now. Not a ton. I mean, listen, we know the guys that are pretty much out for the year. But there are still a few players right now somewhat up in the air, in particular Carey Wilson, Brandon Alexander, big parts of this Bomber defense over the course of this season and the previous years and trips to the Grey Cup.
Look, as I mentioned before, everybody's got bumps and bruises. Everyone's going to have somebody who's injured or banged up, or whether they're in the lineup or not. There's going to be a lot of players playing this weekend that are banged up. There were a lot of players that were playing last weekend that were banged up. I look at some of those names, Huss. Some intrigue me in the sense that Brandon Alexander is a guy that, from what I understood and what I was told, had surgery on that hand. I'm not saying it's impossible to come back. That will be certainly an interesting thing to keep an eye on. We'll see if he can get healthy enough. I don't see that as a this weekend thing. Maybe that's a potentially Grey Cup thing. I look at a guy like Carey Wilson. Carey Wilson, there's a reason why this team has stuck with him throughout his various injuries, and he's suffered several of them. I mean, he's barely been on the field this season, and I bring that up, not to add salt to the wound, but to suggest, do you really want Carey Wilson to be playing in that game this week? I mean, he hasn't really played all season, so great to see him back on the practice field, but I can't imagine he'll get in, or maybe he will. We'll have to wait and see on that. Drew Latarski's been running around, participating. I use that participating because he's not in his full gear for weeks now, and you've kind of wondered why he hasn't kind of taken the field, why he hasn't been dressed up. He's taken a little bit of contact in some of those drills, and he's got his teammates bugging him when he's going to get back in the lineup. That's usually a pretty good sign that he's around the corner. But this team's mostly healthy for the most part. And really, Huss, I mean, you look at some of the injury problem they suffered early on in the season, it's made them even more battle-tested, particularly some of their depth. As you'll recall some of our conversations heading into the season, I thought that depth would be a massive issue for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and that the hope might be that they didn't have to test their depth. Well, they were forced to test their depth early on in this season, and it's worked out for them incredibly well. And so I think, this is a club that, I think that they know how to handle these weeks. They know I imagine there's a bit of gamesmanship, adding guys to the practice, sitting guys out that don't necessarily need the full week. And we'll probably see a lot of that from all teams here heading into as we get closer to the Grey Cup.
So it's Bombers Riders again. I would say this. I don't know. Listen, we've talked about this at length on CFL 110 this year, and I think we both sort of read this pretty closely. I mean, BC would definitely be more of a challenge than they were a couple weeks ago. But the Riders were the better team. And to be honest, much like the Blue Bombers, the thing that you can count on with both of these teams is their defense. And I do think the Riders have a championship level defense. And this is going to be a real test for a Bomber offense that was rolling. But if you look back at the last couple games, Jeff, albeit that they got the points that they needed in miraculous fashion in Montreal, but dating back to a Toronto team in that Friday game with a really stout front, this is going to be one of the biggest tests, if not the biggest test of the year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, if they're going to prove that they are still the kings of the West Division and book another ticket to the Grey Cup.
Well, what were the things that we were talking about the BC Lions, that they would have to come, to Winnipeg into the frigid November temperatures? Well, the Dome team is no longer in it anymore. You got the Riders know what that temperature is like. That whole, advantage is thrown out the window. This is a team that's also good in the trenches, solid in the trenches. They have a great run defense, so they can stop you on the ground. And they also have how would you describe it? A resurged running attack with AJ Ouellette now in the mix and playing well. I think he racked up I think he was south of 80 yards, but was running hard, added 2 touchdowns and I believe caught 1 or 2 passes. He brings a whole new element. Armstead is another guy that they dressed last week. I was a little bit unsure about that whole situation, but they were able to dress 2 running backs last week. But AJ Ouellette is the focus of that. This is a team that, again, can bully you in the trenches. All the things that we were talking about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the ability to be a running team, ability to fight in the trenches, and ability to stop the opposing team's run attack. All those things we were talking about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are all things that the Saskatchewan Roughriders have been doing. And the other thing about it, Huss, too, is talk about 2 teams going into the playoffs playing some of their best football, right? This isn't the Ottawa Red Blacks that are backing into the postseason. This isn't the BC Lions that ultimately were backing into the postseason. These are 2 teams that were able to find their game when the temperature dipped. We're playing some of that confident football, and both enter this weekend with the belief that they can win this game. I'm not suggesting that any team entered into last weekend thinking they weren't going to win. I'm just saying that these 2 teams, you better believe them, because I think they got a lot to show for it.
No, there's no doubt about it. And I think the Riders are going to come in with a lot of confidence. I mean, if you look back at those games the 2 teams played, here in Winnipeg and in Saskatchewan, they were both really, really tight. I mean, the Banjo Bowl, 26-21 win, winning the Labor Day game, 35-33, another 2-point game. I mean, the most lopsided game of this year between these 2 teams was the earlier one where the offense was really sputtering, and Saskatchewan won 19-9.
And wasn't that the game that Nick Dembski saw daylight and was stripped by Jameer Thurman as he was trying to mount a comeback for the Bombers?
Well, and getting into that, and again, we'll have more time, as we get closer to the game to sort of break down the keys for both teams. To me, it is all about ball security and taking care of the football, winning the turnover battle, because I think we're going to see 2 offenses that, will produce, but also are going to have a real tough time putting up big time numbers. And I think you have to expect this game is going to be close. You have to expect that you're going to need to win it in the fourth quarter, and that's one thing the Bombers have, to their credit, been great about. And they have that belief in themselves that, they can do it. They've been doing it for the last 5 years. But a team with momentum and an upstart team that hasn't been there is also dangerous. And, we can talk a lot about the Rider defense. I mean, to me, Trevor Harris, once again, strong game on the weekend, great historic playoff numbers as far as completions. I mean, the win-loss record, I think, now is back at 500, playing against the top teams in the postseason. Trevor Harris is on a roll right now. You add in both of those running backs, the line that they have, the receivers, you could make an argument that potentially on the offensive side of the football, the Riders are even more potent right now than the Bombers are.
I think you can make that argument. Whether or not the person on the receiving end is going to believe you, I think, is up for debate. I mean, you look at these two teams and, they're very evenly matched because they have, they're both great teams. If you look at, you mentioned the running game, I don't know if I'm going to give A.J. Ouellette the edge over Brady Oliveira, who paced the league for a second straight year, obviously, and was been the heartbeat of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for this season and last season. You look at quarterback play. Yeah, Trevor Harris probably has the edge on that. I think Trevor Harris certainly has played tidier football throughout the season, but I think when you talk in that vein about Zach Collaros and you look at his last half of the season, it's a lot better than his first half of the season. And then you look at the weapons on offense. This is one of those things where, if you're Winnipeg, you wish you had, a guy like Dalton Schoen at your disposal. Like, for some reason, he was coming back, much like we've seen an A.J. Ouellette reemerge when it matters the most here. That's not going to be an option for Winnipeg, but Winnipeg still has great receivers. And the good news about Winnipeg's receivers is that some of their top-end guys, a la Nick Dembski, a la Kenny Lawler, have been playing some of their best football over the last few games. The Bombers need, much like the Riders need, their best players to have big games. And that's the thing about these clubs, is that they both have top-end talent in different places. If you look at Saskatchewan, you look at a couple of the other games too, Huss. You make a good point about turnovers and takeaways. That's obviously where coaches start in their preparation, is the importance of limiting the number of turnovers you have and obviously trying to generate as many takeaways as possible. But I'll remind you, Hassan, we saw it in the Eastern semifinal game with Ottawa and Toronto. Ottawa got to the red zone in 5 of their first 6 drives, but were settling for field goals or weren't punching the ball in for touchdowns. And that's kind of been the Bombers' issue, right? It's great to get turnovers. It's great to get, forced takeaways. But if you can't turn them into anything, they're not going to, it's not going to matter where you are in the turnover battle. And I bring that all up to rewind back to 2021, Huss, when I mentioned the last 2 times these teams played in the West Final, the Bombers won 21-17, and the Riders forced 5 turnovers, including 3 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles. The reality is in the first half, and they couldn't do anything with it. So it's all a roundabout way of saying all these things are important. Turnovers, protecting the football, battle of the trenches, all these things matter. But if you don't execute and you don't turn them into points and you don't, execute in the finer details of the results of those things, then it's not going to matter where you end up. And so that's, I think, the biggest lesson is this one. We've talked about this, whether it's been on CFL 110 or Winnipeg Sports Talk. Something always wild happens in these games. Something bananas happens, and that was that was the story or the narrative coming out of the Riders locker room for that Labor Day game, was that they didn't want to be on the receiving end of that one big error or big mistake. And sure enough, Merrill Alford can't handle a Jamison Sheehan topsy-turvy punt, and it results in a Nick Hallett touchdown, which turned that game around quite a bit. So that's kind of, heading into this week, you're going to hear a lot from both sides about execution, about, all these, on their P's and Q's and all these things. What they're really telling you is we need to be the team that makes the fewest mistakes and ultimately isn't the team, caught with our hands between our legs or whatever on a game deciding play. You need to be 100% focused from start to finish. And that's going to be the razor edge difference in this game, because that one team probably isn't going to beat up on the other unless there's a significant injury on one side or the other, and that this is going to come down to the wire. And more often than not, the biggest difference is that one or two plays, those handful of plays that you hear that you don't want to be in the opposite side of, and it just always seems to be even more prominent when these two teams meet.
Well, exactly. And listen, I mean, the reason why I brought up that turnover differential was to point back to that West Final. And I'm here to tell you right now that is no path to victory for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this week. Like, this Rider team is significantly more dangerous than that one, in that they kept getting the football, but they weren't able to do anything with it once they got it. I mean, and credit to the Bomber defense for holding in that game. I think they were just down 3 points at halftime after being down 5-0 in the turnover differential in the first period. Like, they're going to need to be way cleaner. And listen, they've cleaned it up a lot. It seemed like a lot of those things happened in the first 6 games of the season and have sort of reverted back to the consistent team with great ball security and a good takeaway differential. But the Bombers really have owned the Riders too for the last number of years. I mean, I'm just looking at this. Obviously they went 2-1 this year. They split last year. Before that, the Bombers had won 8 straight, and they're 11-2 against Saskatchewan in the last 13 games. Some of them have been close, some of them haven't been, but they have consistently found their way to win. I do think, though, Jeff, this is going to be as big of a test as Winnipeg is going to get from Saskatchewan, really at any point over this entire championship era of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Bombers under O'Shea and Kyle Walters.
But even if you look at some of those other games, like you look at the 21-17 victory in 2021, that was the year that the Bombers beat up on everybody. I think their average...
That was the West Final.
I know, that's what I mean, though. But that's what I'm saying. The Bombers were beating up on everybody, and then they go into this game and they win by 4 points, and they have 5 turnovers in the first half. That's what I'm talking about, the wackiness between these two teams. I feel like everything is just thrown out the window when these two teams play. Remember 2019? 2019 West Final, Huss? Was it the West Final or is it the BC? It was West Final 2019. That was the year that the Saskatchewan Roughriders finished first.
Yeah, in
the
Sask.
Bombers had to, exactly, in Sask. And Cody Fajardo, what? Is that the one he dings it off the upright and the game's over? That was, I'll remind people, the plays that led up to that was I think it was Marcus Sales, now on the Riders. I forget who it was. Didn't have that takeaway on the line, gave them a new this is what we're talking about. The margin of error, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that the Riders were playing better football, this time around than maybe in 2021. It's just something about that game. Something happens, and you look at that. You're right. The Bombers have been dominating them. You don't think the Roughriders know that? You don't think that the Riders don't know that the Bombers have fed them their lunch for, a lot of the last few years here? Were the team that won the first playoff game, first regular season game, first preseason game, and would have been first Grey Cup if they were able to get it done against Toronto that year. Of course they know that. And so, I think this is going to fire them up. It's going to be, there's going to be no need for manufacturing enthusiasm and hatred and energy for this one. I don't even know how to predict it. All it feels like is this one's going to be close. I do think that the Riders are a more confident team than they have been in several years playing Winnipeg. So again, I go back to that belief. These guys are here for a mission. They get to be, us against the world. I think the Bombers are still doing a bit of an us against the world. I think they're still thinking that, people think they're that 2-6 team through 8 games and not the team that ripped off 8 straight after. And I'm sure that will bode well for them. I just think it's two teams that are dialed in, focused, 2 good coaching staffs. There's so many comparisons, similarities between these two teams. I do give Winnipeg the edge. I just think that experience is a massive piece of the puzzle here. As I mentioned, the Riders haven't been in the playoffs the last 2 seasons, so they don't really have that experience, the same degree of experience as Winnipeg would have as a team through these situations. But they gained a lot, I would argue, last week. And so long as they can come out and be healthy, I think that what they were able to do last week against BC is going to be the win that they need in their sails. And I do think that the Bombers are going to need to be because starts have not been their friends for a lot of games this season. So they're going to need to make sure that they're extra focused and dialed in for the start of that game, because it's going to be a hatred from start to finish.
Hey, folks, we're pushing 500 in the chat right now. I'd have been over there. I should have mentioned this before. But we are so close to 12,000 subscribers. If you haven't already subbed to the channel, do us a favor, hit that subscribe. It's completely free. You'll get all the latest Winnipeg Sports Talk content, and you can also turn your notifications on so you know when things like Jets This Week with Jets Weekly with Connor Rabchak, WST Sunday Live with Connor and Liz is going as well. But hit that thumbs up while you're at it and hit the subscribe button. Hammer, we'll kind of dive into both of these matchups a lot more on CFL 110 this week, as well as some of the stories coming out of the end of the season for two more teams. But what did you think of Toronto's victory over Ottawa in the East final, or East semi?
I got to give credit to Ottawa. I think a lot of people were looking at what Toronto was able to do Ottawa not too long ago, especially with that hot start, and that wasn't the case here. But we said this for weeks, Huss, that if Ottawa was going to have a shake at this game, it was going to have to be on the heels of a great game by Drew Brown. I thought Drew Brown, minus obviously the 2 pick sixes at the end of the game, I thought played incredibly well. Now, he threw 61 passes. That is a lot of passing attempts. Did I think that when I said that Drew Brown would have to will his team, did I believe it was going to have to be 61 passes worth? No. And if you flip over to the other side, Huss, I mean, Chad Kelly attempted 20 and completed 18. So this is a team, and this is the thing about Toronto, which I think is scary. And it hasn't really burnt them. It burnt them in the East final last year to a certain degree, obviously, with that horrendous game from Chad Kelly. But they're a team that aren't afraid to toss it deep. Like, they just aren't. And I felt like, when Davaris Daniels came out at halftime and did his TSN interview and talked about how, that wasn't the best first half, and we'll see who shows up in the second half, and I can't wait to kind of see it. I kind of felt right then and there that Ottawa had their chance through the first 2 quarters, and that Toronto at home were going to turn the tide, and that was exactly what happened. I thought it was, the rest of itself kind of played out the way it would. I think too many things caught up to Ottawa, too many things that existed throughout the regular season. Their execution was better, but they relied too much on their quarterback, didn't have an established run game. And while I thought Braylon Addison had a great game, kind of being a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, and particularly in that run game, it was a fun season in Ottawa. It just ended way too soon, and unfortunately, it was predictable, I felt, in the East semi.
Yeah, listen, I'm happy for Bobby Dice and the team that they actually came out and put their best foot forward in that game. I mean, there was part of me that thought that they were just going to get, the floor wiped with them. But listen, they were up 10-0. They were very much in that game, and they did look good at times. But I think just we saw over the course of 60 minutes the Toronto Argonauts on both sides of the football were the superior unit. And listen, I think for Montreal, they look at this and go, well, listen, Ottawa did a lot of good things offensively and definitely did move the football. To your point, you got to be able to get 7s instead of 3s. That's what they didn't do well enough, but there was some room to move on the football field out there. And maybe just Bomber fans and people on this side of things just think of that Toronto defense as so stifling because of how well they played against Winnipeg this year. Mm-hmm. But again, they're going up against the Alouettes, who, like the Bombers, had the benefit of a week of rest and just watching the other teams beat the hell out of each other and know they come in. But listen, we'll get to the Coolbet lines in a minute. I mentioned the Bombers are 4.5-point favorites, much tighter in this game. Montreal -2, and that would tell us, with the kind of the baked-in points for home field, that I think the bookmakers say on a neutral field, the Argos would be a slight favorite. And to be honest, I think in a lot of cases you can sort of throw out the venue when you've got two teams playing with the stakes as high as they are, much like we saw last year. And to me, this is the biggest chance for Chad Kelly. I mean, listen, he got the job done yesterday. He was very, very good. But we all remember what happened last year in the East Final when the Argos were the 16-2 team, when they were the massive favorite. He had the worst day of his professional career. And you know what? A year later, he gets another crack, and there's been a lot of stuff happening around him and off the field. But as far as the way he's looking right now in the team, they seem to be ready for another crack at the Alouettes.
Absolutely. And I think that the Alouettes are being massively disrespected here by the odds makers. I feel like people overall are massively disrespecting the Alouettes, a team that I don't think I need to remind anybody locked up the East Division well before the regular season was done, so they could do whatever they wanted to with their lineup. And so I think a lot of people are looking at what Toronto's been able to do, looking at us, the same storyline that you're suggesting, Huss, and maybe this is their chance for revenge. Those words have certainly come out of my mouth in selling the Toronto Argonauts and where they could, the damage they could do in this playoffs. I just think, and I go back to my point I made, I believe, in CFL 110 last week, was that Jason Moss with 2 weeks to plan to get ready is a dangerous combination. And Noel Thorpe as a defensive coordinator, I just feel like if you look at that game in Ottawa, I mean, yes, Chad Kelly was able to move the ball downfield. They were able to establish their run game. But Chad Kelly took some massive pops. And if I'm the Montreal Alouettes, I'm looking at what they were able to do to get what Ottawa was able to do to get those clean looks on Chad Kelly, because there's a couple of those hits I didn't think he was getting up from. Now, Chad Kelly is that guy that he will stick in the pocket. He will wait. He has that fearless element to his game. He's not going to tuck and run or duck away from a would-be tackler if the play is open and he wants to hit a guy downfield. But you need to use that to your advantage if you are the Montreal Alouettes. And the Montreal Alouettes have a better defense than the Ottawa Redblacks. And so I think you do look at some of the things Ottawa was able to do. I thought Drew Brown was able to move the ball downfield with relative ease against Toronto with not really a running threat. I also think you look at, again, the pressure that they were able to get on Chad Kelly. I also look at Montreal, and I look at a team that is going to have that same attitude as they took into the playoffs last year, and rightfully so. Everyone's talking about how the Toronto Argonauts are probably going to win the East. Everyone's talking about how the Montreal Alouettes haven't played well over the last month or 6 weeks. This team knows exactly what people are saying, and I think they're going to show you. I think we saw a lot of it in that game against Winnipeg. Huss. I mean, Winnipeg needed that. That was a playoff game for Winnipeg. Winnipeg needed that game to punch their ticket to the West, to be in the situation they're in right now, to get an easier route to the Grey Cup. And I don't care. You cannot convince me for 1 second. And we heard Zach Collaros talk about it this week, that in those games where they don't mean anything, it's not like you take your foot off the gas, but you can't manufacture the same feeling and attitude, environment, and moment of a game where if you lose, you go home. Your season's over. You can't manufacture that feeling in a game that it doesn't exist. So I think you are going to get the best, the whatever you want to call it, the pissed off version of the Montreal Alouettes, the tired of hearing people talking about how they're not playing great football despite being the class of the CFL all season long. So I think you're going to see a very, very good Alouettes team, and it's going to take a lot from the Toronto Argonauts to rewrite that story, to hand that loss back to them after suffering such a humiliating defeat in the East Final last year.
Well, we'll chop it up and get thoughts on all four remaining teams, Montreal and Toronto, Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, on CFL 110 coming up on Wednesday here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And then we might have to do it not on Wednesday because of the travel day next week for a Grey Cup, but cannot wait for an episode of CFL 110 from Vancouver. And as I say, hopefully, I am crossing my fingers, we're going to be bringing the Bombers with us. I didn't mention this off the top of the program. We were too pumped about Super Saturday coming up, and of course the Jets being 11-1. There was one unfortunate result this weekend on local sports that I think really stings, and it is the Bisons losing at home with home field in a really tight game with Regina. Regina driving the field in the final 3 minutes, scoring the go-ahead touchdown with 14 seconds. And listen, after a 7-1 season, you lose in that fashion, it's going to be heartbreaking no matter what. But this also was the final game on the sideline for legendary head coach Brian Dobie. And Hammer, I mean, we both crossed paths with Dobie so many times. He is synonymous with football here in the province. Thoughts on just, a disappointing end for the Bisons, but also the end of the road for a guy that has been living, eating, and breathing Bison football for almost 3 decades.
Yeah, obviously tough season for the Bisons. Don't really need to get too much in it. It really was shaping up to seemingly to be a fairy tale ending for Brian Dobie. And, of course, that's football. That's any given Saturday, Sunday where, especially when you're playing a rival, maybe that was the one rivalry win that Saskatchewan gets this year, right? Maybe the Bisons are the sacrificial lambs of the whole situation. But as far as Brian Dobie goes, yeah, I mean, massively long career, certainly crossed paths with Brian several times over his tenure, especially covering the professional team that's just across the hallway. Things that stick out for me with Brian are obviously an inability to escape an interview. Nobody can talk longer than Brian Dobie.
Very loquacious.
There had been times in the past where I'd have to open my conversation with Brian. I got 15 minutes. So I'm just not even going to say hello. I'm just going to drive right into my first question. And if I feel like it's going too long, then, I'll let you know. But that's just, again, speaks to his character, his care for the program, his care for his players to be around that long. And it speaks to his ability to not piss people off, man. I mean, that's a long run in one place, right? Where you're calling the shots on things. And I'm sure there are moments throughout his tenure that, he wanted to go to the university and get more or, whatever. And so I'm sure he's got, let's just put it this way, Huss, I look forward to the book. He's probably got lots of stories to share. But the mark that Brian Dobie's left on U Sport and particularly Canadian university football is up there with a lot of people who have helped build this game. And I wish him the best in retirement and doing something new. I wonder if he even knows what he's going to be able to do with himself now that he won't be walking through those same doors after this season.
Well, you know what? I mean, we'll look forward to getting him on the show at some point. I figured we'd let the disappointment cool off a little bit. I was speaking with one of the guys on the team yesterday at the hockey game, and he had just come from, a team meeting with Coach Dobie. And he said it was incredibly emotional. Obviously Brian thanking all of the departing seniors from the club, including Mike O'Shea Jr., that will have finished their eligibility, and then just knowing that it was, the end of the road. This was the last time he'd be doing it. He's a guy that, started at Churchill, and you want to talk about a program in a better place than when he took over. Obviously, there's the Vanier Cup Championship. There's been, so many successful seasons of this.
Became a bit of an NFL factory, which is just in and of itself an impressive, when you look at
sure. I mean,
Izzy Adonijah and you look at
and I just think of back even when I was working there. I mean, they were playing in that dump of a university stadium, and now they've got this state-of-the-art facility that they call home on campus, and he, of course, is a huge part of that as well. But listen to Stan Pierre and Vaughn Mitchell and everybody with that club. We, wish them the best moving forward. It'd be very interesting to see who the next head coach is. Mm-hmm. I, for a long time, thought that Stan was a slam dunk. He was the first assistant coach hired by the club. That was another thing that Brian worked very hard to make happen. And it seems like they've had a succession plan. But this is a job that I think a lot of people are going to want. I mean, when you combine the facility with what this team has done, and let's not forget Jackson Tuschinski, who is, one unbelievable athlete, and I know has his eyes set on a potential professional career going into his combine and draft year. there still is a lot of talent in that room right now, despite the fact that they're losing some key players, particularly on the defensive side of football. So tough one for the Bisons. Would have been great to be talking about Can West Championship game next weekend on Friday, and then the Bombers and Riders going at it along with the Jets and the Dallas Stars. But it wasn't to be. And again, from all of us at Winnipeg Sports Talk, congratulations to Coach Dobie on just an absolutely incredible career. Hammer, great stuff. I will look forward to catching up with you in about 48 hours to dive into the Final Four in the Canadian Football League on the latest episode of CFL 110.
Looking forward to it, my friend. Should be another solid show. We're spoiled again with football this weekend. Jets are flying high. It's good. It's a good time to be in Winnipeg. It's a good time to be a Winnipeg sports fan. So cherish this while it's still around. Hopefully it lasts for a while, but always remember.
Well, hey, you know what? It's all about Saturday, a Saturday for the Bombers. And, of course, the Jets have 3 huge games as they look to continue their winning ways right now with 3 Central Division opponents this week. Hammer, we'll talk to you Wednesday on CFL 110. Thanks for doing this.
Take care, buddy.
All right, great stuff with our pal Jeff Hamilton. Looking at the we're going to get to the Coolbet lines in a minute. Let's get Remis back in here, though. And Reem, yeah, I didn't want to spoil the buzz that everyone had right off the bat, but just a heartbreaker for the Bisons. And listen, as we've seen this incredible run that the Jets are on right now and what the Bombers have done over the last 3 months, it kind of looked like it was setting up to be just an all-time weekend here in Winnipeg if you included a potential Canada West final, but it wasn't to be. And that's it for Coach Dobie after 3 decades leading the Bisons.
Yeah, it's a tough one to go down to Regina. Huss, he thought the Bisons having such a great season. Would it end with a storybook ending for Coach Dobie? Announced his retirement near the start of the year. I think, look, football comes down to one game. You're not always going to win, and unfortunate, but it doesn't take away from the great regular season they had. An absolutely incredible career. It's hard to think about Bison football without Coach Dobie being there. So congratulations to him again on a fantastic career.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Listen, let's get to, first of all, hey, big takeaways from NFL yesterday? We'll sort of spend some more time talking NFL later on, but we've got a big Monday nighter that we'll get to in the Coolbet lines.
How about the Cowboys? Here, they stink. And now they're Dak Prescott. He's out, done. So yeah, they're done. So that was, you're waiting for this offensive explosion from them, and it just is not happening. They don't really have a run game, although Dowdle was okay. So that was tough for them.
Gregory in chat. Is Gregory, do you agree with us that we can cross off the Cowboys from that playoff list? I mean, they're 3-5 right now. And when you look at the standings in the NFC, you've got 3 6-win teams already in the NFC North, Detroit having 7. The entire NFC West has 4 wins. Arizona's in first place with 5. Atlanta, obviously, someone's going to win that division. The Commanders are 7-2. The Eagles are 6-2. Like, I'm trying to imagine a scenario where 3 teams from the NFC East actually get into the playoffs when you look at how good the North is right now. And I don't see the path going forward. Apparently, Dak's going to miss some time as well.
Yes.
They probably should have done some major revision to the roster and organization after getting pumped at home by Green Bay last year in the playoffs. But Mike McCarthy got one more kick at the can, and it is ending miserably for the Dallas Cowboys. Big wins for the Bills, the Ravens, who just tore up Denver. Baltimore is just such a confounding team because, and I do understand, people look at them and go, oh my God, that's the best team in the NFL. And then they lose to Cleveland, and then they lose to Oakland, or the Raiders, I should say, Las Vegas. You never really know what you're going to get from Baltimore, although at their peak, like at their ceiling, they're as dangerous as any team in the NFL. And of course, tonight we got the Chiefs looking to just go about their business and get to 8-0 against the Buccaneers, who obviously look quite a bit different without Mike Evans and without Chris Godwin.
Yeah, it's too bad. They were looking pretty good with those two guys, but the wide receiver injuries, if you're playing fantasy, been the story this season. So many of them, including more going down yesterday. CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, who was injured, and then former New Orleans Saints receiver Michael Thomas calling out David Carr on X, accusing him of throwing hospital balls, and they end up losing to the Panthers, and the coach gets fired this morning.
You can't survive losing to the Carolina Panthers. When you're already on a 6-game losing streak. That's the one that you absolutely have to have. But hey, good on Bryce Young. Like, I'm kind of cheering for this guy now and pulling for him now. Like, I don't know whether he's ever going to turn into a regular NFL quarterback. But, man, there's a lot on his shoulders. Hey, he's getting paid a lot as the number 1 overall pick. But when you consider what happened last year with them having the number 1 pick and having it go to Chicago because they traded for Bryce Young, losing his job earlier. Listen, he showed some glimpses a little bit. And I like Canales, the coach there. I think he's been put into a real tough situation. But Saints fans, for the most part, quite pleased that they have moved on from DA, and there'll be a new sheriff in New Orleans. But very disappointing considering they are hosting the Super Bowl this year, and the closest they're going to get is maybe some of the Super Bowl events in and around New Orleans the week of the event. Let's get over to Coolbet right now and check out what we've got for. Oh, by the way, nice win for the Vikings. Wasn't pretty, but they got it done. Combined with that loss to Green Bay, they're back in second, just 1 game back of the Detroit Lions, who rolled all over Green Bay and look to be clearly the number 1 team in the NFC right now. All right, the Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites tonight. Buyer beware on that. They'll probably win the game. They always do. They don't necessarily cover the spread. And we saw a vintage backdoor cover by the Raiders last week at the game that I was at. Although I do think that, they'll be ramped up for Monday night. They'll get out early. We'll just see whether the Buccaneers have enough offensively to sort of hang around with the Chiefs. The total for the game is 46. As I mentioned, the point spread is 8.5. I'm looking at some of these TD scores. I was going to take Kareem Hunt, but when I saw how chalky it is, minus 189, a little bit tough to swallow. Look for a big game from Travis Kelce. He's at minus 110. I'm rolling with Xavier Worthy for an anytime touchdown tonight, plus 175 for the Chiefs speedster right now. We do have an exclusive for the Lock Shop. I threw in DeAndre Hopkins, 45 or more receiving yards. Patty's on Cade Otton, 50-plus receiving yards. We're taking the over 45.5. That is in the exclusives at plus 425 right now. The Patty primetime is there. Baker Mayfield, 15-plus rushing yards. A Kelce anytime TD. And over 3.5 field goals made. That's plus 800. And what do they got in the DGen den today? We always nice these random hockey props. Yossi, 4 shots or more. Draisaitl, an assist. Cade Otton, 5-plus receptions. And White, 40 rush plus receiving yards. That's at plus 650. Probably give a little run on that with our friends in the DGen den. If you want to ride with the Oilers tonight, Podkolzin and Bratt both to get a point. Bouchard, 2-plus shots on goal. Oilers to win is plus 850 from our friends over at Edmonton Sports Talk. And then there's some other exclusives as well for tonight's NFL game, which you can see in the exclusives page. And again, back to the CFL. The lines are set. Montreal, 2-point favorites over the Toronto Argonauts. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, that has actually dropped to 3.5 as we've been doing the show today. Wow.
Yeah, I pulled it up during you and Jeff. You said it's opened at 4.5, but it has since gone down to 3.5. So
it was 4.5. It was 4.5 during the Lock Shop. And I'd put out on Twitter, on X or whatever, on Saturday night, what does everyone think that the line is going to be? And I really thought that it would be in and around 3, so 3.5 is good. I got to totally see the Bombers winning this game by 4 points. I mean, that was the difference in the West Final a few years ago in December. And then, of course, their 2 wins over the Riders, 1 by 5, 1 by 2. So right there in the mix. Of course, if you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. What, you got to lean on this game tonight?
I like the Cade Otton props. You had a huge game last week with their top 2 receivers out. I remember Isaiah Likely scoring a couple TDs against the Chiefs in week 1. So I'm in on Cade Otton tonight.
2 NHL games. Kings are in Nashville to take on the Preds. Preds minus 143. LA plus 121. And the Devils are minus 130 favorites in Edmonton taking on the Oilers tonight. Remo, while you're at it and you've got this screen put up, why don't we finish off the show by pulling up the NHL standings?
Oh, sure. NHL standings? Absolutely, Hustler. No problem.
NHL standings, and feel free to go the entire league. That's fine. Because what you will see is the Winnipeg Jets at 11-1. 22 points in 12 games. 3 points clear of the Florida Panthers with a game in hand. You know, one thing that's interesting, and they've kind of done it very quietly, is we've been focusing on Winnipeg, and Winnipeg beat them in overtime. The Minnesota Wild are the only other team in the league with 1 regulation loss. 8-1-2. Hell of a start for Bill Guerin's team.
Yeah, good for them. Kaprizov, he's up there with a point, so he's healthy. You know, Logan Stanley didn't sit on him, or hasn't yet. Huss, we did see Logan Stanley lay the boom yesterday, so we are awaiting
5 booms for that hit.
We are awaiting the Jets Wild matchup. That is one of the WST nights in December. So I can't wait for that.
Oh, that'll be like the holiday party, Saturday, December 21st. Cannot wait for that. Next WST game, though, is the Panthers, the number 1 and 2 teams in the NHL. Funny how that worked out. WinnipegJets.com/WST and jump on seats and join us. A lot of people asking, what about the crowds? Well, tell you what, the team certainly is worthy of people buying tickets and going to see them. That was awesome yesterday. The entire season so far has been great. So if you've been waiting to get off the couch and get down to the rink, I would suggest this week a great one to do it. Utah, Colorado, Dallas. But then the game we'd love you to join us with that special offer. Ticket includes a beverage. Join us in the 316 bar before the game as well. Those are available. WinnipegJets.com/WST, November 19th. And as I always like to remind everyone, Remis, Paul Maurice, 0-4 against the Jets since he bounced.
Yeah, crazy stats there considering the success that Florida has had. I mean, that first game that he came back was, I just remember the comments from Mark Scheifele after in the performance that he had. So looking forward to being in the building. And then, we're not going to say, but if the Bombers win on Saturday and then win the week after, that Tuesday could be a bit of a celebratory event if things go the right way, but you never know.
A big.
I don't want to get too. You don't want to get too ahead of ourselves.
Away from a party. First of all, let's get the Bombers with us to the Grey Cup next week. Cannot wait. We will be out there broadcasting from Thursday through the weekend. Coming back on Monday night, just in time to join you all in the Upper Bowl at Canada Life Center in Section 316 for that Jets-Panthers game. Tomorrow, though, game day edition. I'm just about called them the Coyotes. Utah HC in town. Our first chance to see the NHL's new team, the new unis. Maybe they can bring our records in history back and drop them off in Winnipeg when they show up. That would be nice.
They don't actually have them. It's a new franchise. I don't know where the records and history are. Parts unknown.
They're in a dustbin out at the Arizona State University in some box above the ASU Sun Devils team, along with some other stuff that the Coyotes left when they, for all intents and purposes, folded. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more, considering it's our first visit with the new squad. Join us tomorrow. Should be a great one. We'll have the latest from the morning skate, everything you need to get ready for a big one tomorrow night. And, of course, we'll break down the Monday Nighter and the full Week 9 in the National Football League. And the latest from Bomber practices, they are getting ready for a big one Saturday night at Princess Auto Stadium against the hated Saskatchewan Roughriders. Cannot wait, man. This is going to be such a fun week. Stay tuned with us. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. And again, we're just about at 12K. Let's get that in the next few hours if possible. Hit that subscribe button. Help us out. Get to the big number. We are just a few away from 12,000. That's going to do it for us. Huge thanks to all of our sponsors that make the show happen every day. Big thanks to Jeff Hamilton and, of course, Dan Robertson from TSN. Join us tomorrow as we get ready for the Jets and the Hockey Club tomorrow at Canada Life Center. Have a great one, everyone, and thanks for being with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.